Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so today we're going to talk about woe to those that are pregnant. Okay, so I wanted to bring this information to you because I thought it would be encouraging. And so this comes from Matthew 24:19, and it's actually in the Bible 3 other times. And so I have a slide that talks about that. And so it's in Matthew 24. That's when Jesus is talking about the signs to look for in the last days. And so he says, but woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And so I'm sure you've been aware that Roe versus Wade was overturned on June 25th or 24th. And so what's interesting is that we've seen the pro-abortion protesters, just like, okay, so one of the things that they said is they were going to make this the summer of rage because they're so angry about Roe v. Wade being overturned. Okay. So I definitely think they are under woe right now. And so this headline here is, with Roe v. Wade overturned, what's next for our constitutional rights? So they're worried about what else the Supreme Court is going to try to overturn. So it's interesting too, because even gay right activists are worried that the gay marriage thing is going to be overturned. And then like they're worried that they're going to take away birth control. They're worried that women's like personal health information is not going to be protected. So there's just a lot of worrying going on, okay, and anger, okay. So it's been kind of interesting to see their reaction. And then it's interesting. So I, had started making a video about woe to those who are pregnant. And so then I was trying to think, well, what, and to those who are nursing babies in those days, like what could that apply to? And I was I was originally in the direction of, I was thinking like Trump would be like the man child that was born, that's mentioned in Revelation 12. So I was going to kind of go along that route. But then it dawned on me, like, wait a minute. The people that are nursing babies right now are having problems because of, okay, let me read this headline. 5 parents on the stress of trying to feed their babies amid a nationwide formula shortage. Okay, so this picture here is showing the empty shelves of baby formula. and so that just like floored me when I figured that out. It's like, whoa, this is both happening at the same time. And so to me that was actually encouraging, because if these are the signs of the last days, then this is a pretty strong sign, that's happening in our day. And so, look up, for our redemption draws nigh. We should be encouraged by seeing signs like this. So definitely very interesting. And that whole like baby formula shortage too was kind of a weird thing. How they came about and stuff like that. So so I'm not really sure. I think kind of our government handled it poorly. So definitely, kind of a weird thing to happen, in this day and age, just, however it came about, it was kind of a weird thing. So, and so here's the slide where I show you the 3 different places. So Matthew 24, and all these are the chapters in the Gospels where you do have the they're very similar chapters. Luke's edition is like slightly different than Matthew and Mark's. Matthew and Mark's are very similar. Luke says things slightly differently, so if you want a little more information, go to Luke. But these are definitely your last day chapters, okay, to go take a look at to see, what we should be looking for, what we should be expecting, okay. And so then in Luke 21:23, it says, "Woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days, for there will be great distress upon the land and wrath to this people." Okay. So definitely think we're in a time of great distress. Okay. And and definitely with the backlash of the pro-abortion people, is really causing distress upon the land. And so then it's interesting too, and it says wrath to these people. So, are we going to see God's wrath come upon the pro-abortionist? In short order, in due time, because if that's true, then we can expect our redemption to be drawing nigh. Okay. Okay. So then let's see. So I looked up this verse because I was trying to think, because of this verse where it says, "For there will be great distress upon the land and wrath to this people," I was kind of wondering if there was some kind of curse in the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible, that was kind of put upon pregnant mothers and nursing mothers for turning away from God. I was wondering if there was some kind of curse that was put on mothers, women, and I didn't find it in the list of, so in Deuteronomy, I think, is where they go up on the mountain and there's the curses are listed on one mountain and the other curses, the blessings are listed on the other mountain. I didn't see anything in there about kind of like childbirth or, pregnant women or anything. But while I was looking for it, I did find this verse. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just means I didn't find it. And so, but I did find this verse, and so this really stood out to me. Kind of goes with what we're talking about in this video. So Genesis 3:16, God says, okay, so this is after Adam and Eve in the garden, okay, and after they eat the fruit. And I really think that story, like we see that as kind of the story of creation, but I think there's a lot of prophetic shadows of the last days, okay, because I think the sin of the last days is also eating the fruit of the garden that exists, God's garden that exists today. And because what I think is that, Israel is God's nation and America is God's nation. And so I think when God comes to judge, he's going to be judging the people that ate from the fruit of those nations, to kind of like feed their own lives and their own gods. And so that's what I really believe, is that God's gonna send judgment to put on those people because I believe that God's people are the ones that love the nation of Israel and the nation of America. And so I'm looking right now because there's a saying that the Jewish people have, which really applies to, okay, I thought I wrote it in here. let's see. I can't find it right now. Let me see. I'll just try to do it from memory. But basically, it has to do with um, that those who mourn the destruction of Israel are the ones that will like be around to see it rebuilt in the days of Messiah. Okay. So something that's a really loose, probably poor paraphrase of it. And I'm sorry I can't seem to be finding it now. But it also that same concept is repeated in the Gospels. Not in the Gospels, I mean the Psalms too. Just the concept of that those who love God's land, or those who mourn over the destruction of God's land, will be rescued, and be around to see it rebuilt in the days of Messiah. Okay, so it's just a really encouraging, and so what we have now is, I'm sure, that if you belong to God now, you are mourning over what's happening to our nation right now. And I'm sure there's people in Israel mourning over what they see happening in their country. And so those are the people that God is looking for, you know, to consider his people, because they love what God loves, and God loves America, and God loves Israel. And so in the story in the garden, Adam and Eve were eating the fruit, okay, and God said, "Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil," but yet they did, okay, and um, and so then he brought judgment on them, and the judgment to the woman, is he said to the woman, he said, "I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." And so I sometimes think that there's a lot of hidden prophetic messages in these curses that God put on Adam and Eve. Okay. See, what's interesting to me about this curse is that it says to the woman. He doesn't call her Eve. It just says to the woman. Okay. Which could be kind of a hidden reference to like the harlot of Babylon. Okay. And it says, God says to the woman, "I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you'll bring forth children." So that's definitely a repeat of woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. Okay. And so we are suffering a curse in this country, because there have been people that have not, loved this nation, that, that have kind of eaten of the fruit, okay, to feed their own flesh, okay. And and so then this next part, "Yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." So that could be a reference for like, I could see two possible fulfillments. One is, so then they will desire Biden, and see, that's kind of what we see happening right now, is that they're desiring Biden to, jump in and undo what the Supreme Court did and bring back abortion in this country. And so we see them crying out to Biden to do something. But then I could even see this with the other group of people like crying out for Trump to like save them from, the angry pro-abortionist protesters. Um, so um, so we'll see what happens. Okay. And so, because what I think is interesting is that you continue to read on in verse 20. It says, "Now the man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all the living." Okay, so this is where you get the name Eve first shows up. Okay. Um, and so what I think is like the woman that ate the forbidden fruit is not really actually Eve. That Eve, I mean, it is in the story, but prophetically, like in shadow form, it, like I said, it kind of refers to like the harlot or whatever, of Babylon, and that God's using the name Eve to kind of to refer to, now the man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all the living. Okay, so this is how I look at this verse. Okay, the man could be Messiah, called his wife's name Eve. And so the bride of Messiah is Eve, okay? Because she was the mother of all living, okay? So what's interesting is that it's you're kind of seeing what I'm seeing is that there's this woman who doesn't love the nation of Israel and the nation of America and wants to kill her children, okay? But there is another woman who would be represented by the name Eve, who would represent the bride of Christ, who loves children, okay, and loves to give children, okay, who is the mother of all the living, okay. Um, and so I think that's cool. So that gave me chills. I hope it gave you chills. Okay. And so then another verse that I found connected to this is in Luke 23, verses 28 to 32. It says, "But Jesus turning to them said, 'Daughters of Jerusalem, stop weeping for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us. For if they do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?' Two others also who were criminals were being led away to be put to death with him." Okay, so another similar concept, okay. So Jesus like said, "Stop weeping for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." So he's talking to the daughters of Jerusalem, okay. And so partly, what he's saying relates to his day and age, but it also relates to our day and age, okay. I think it's a prophetic shadow of what's happening now, okay. And because he said the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren. Well, definitely they're saying, Blessed are the barren right now, okay. And the wounds that never bore and the breast that never nursed. They hate babies, these in our day and age. They want to kill the babies. They think it's better to be barren, because then you can continue your career and you can continue having sex. And, so we are definitely in that day, okay, when they say that, okay. And then they also like believe the whole stupid thing that having a baby ruins your body, which I think is a big fat lie. So, so definitely we're in that day. And then it says, and it's so opposite of what God says, because God says in his word that blessed, the people that have their quiver full of I forget how that works, but like children are like arrows, and blessed are those who have a quiver full of them, or something like that. Um, but it's blessed, basically the word of God tells us that we're blessed to have a lot of children. Okay. Um, and so we live in an age where people don't respect the word of God and don't believe what God says. Okay. Um, um, okay, and then it says, then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. Okay. Um, for if they do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry? So what's interesting is right now, um, Biden is in power right now. Okay. And, but what we have is, people on the left are protesting. Okay. So if they're protesting when their guy is in power, what are they going to be like when you know, their guy is no longer in power, when Biden is no longer in power? Okay. Um, so definitely kind of interesting. Um, so, um, anyways, and then, because I got this verse here from Ezekiel 17 at the bottom, it says, all the trees of the field will know that I am the Lord. I bring down the high tree, exalt the low tree, dry up the green tree, and make the dry tree flourish. I am the Lord. I've spoken and I will perform it. Okay, so this is definitely a verse that's talking about the reversal of fortune. Okay, because what happens is, okay, so right now what I believe is that God's people are the low tree, or the dry tree. Okay, and that God's enemies are the high tree or the green tree. Okay, and and so God is going to bring a reversal of fortune where his people will no longer be the tail, they'll be the head. Okay, and he's going to end up bringing down the high tree and drying up the green tree. Okay, so definitely very interesting. So are we going to see God put an end to Biden and what he's doing? Okay, that's what I'm wondering. Okay, um, okay, so let's look at more of Luke 21. Just to understand what else we could look for in these last days. Okay, and and maybe to see what else is coming true. And so it says, and while some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, as for these things which you are looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another which will not be torn down. They questioned him, saying, Teacher, when therefore will these things happen? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? Okay, so so basically he's going to answer the question of what the signs are when these things are about to take place. Okay, and the things that are about to take place is that okay, so they were looking at the temple, and Jesus was saying the temple is going to be torn down. Okay, so if you understand the history of the nation of Israel, there's been two times during its history where the temple was torn down, okay, by Israel's enemies. Okay, the Romans tore it down in 70 CE, and then like something like 423 years before the common area. Yeah, 423 years before the common area is when common era keep saying that wrong. Common era is when it was when it was torn down by the Babylonians. And so if we look at, and so we know in the New Testament that that God kind of refers to his people as being the temple rather than like a physical, than just the physical building. Um, and so what I think is that we could think of the nation of Israel and the nation of America as being a type of God's temple, okay? And that what we're going to see is we're going to enter into a time when the stones will be torn down in these nations, okay? Um, um, you know, and so that when we see these signs, that's what's about to take place, is that um, the stones are about to be torn down, and stones could kind of refer to leaders, the leaders too, okay? Because um, you know how Jesus is like the cornerstone that's been rejected, okay? But there's definitely quote unquote stones that have not been rejected, um, that people have used right now to build their kingdom, in America and Israel. Um, if you're following me, hopefully you're following me. Okay. Um, but so keep that in mind. Okay, we're gonna see kind of a repeat of history where um, the temple in some form or fashion is going to be torn down. Okay. Um, okay. But and that's why the Messiah needs to come, because the Messiah is going to come and rebuild the temple. Okay. And so I really think that Jesus is going to come and rebuild America and rebuild Israel. Okay. That's what we're going to be doing during the Messianic era. Um, you know, besides worshiping God, So, okay, so then it says, so I'm at verse 8 here. It says, and he said, see to it that you are not misled, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is near. Do not go after them. Okay, so I wrote here Trump and his false prophets, okay, because we definitely have seen Trump acting like kind of this false messiah type thing, okay? And so we definitely, like, I mean, he didn't say it was Jesus, but he kind of said, like, I am the chosen one, okay? And then we definitely have his false prophets, saying the same stuff about him, that, that he is the chosen one, he's Cyrus, he's the anointed one. And then they've definitely been saying, like, um, um, I talked about this in one of my other videos, that concept of kingdom now theology, okay, that they think the kingdom is now, or the kingdom could be now with Trump kind of stuff. Um, um, but also too, I mean, because they expect, they think miracles are happening now and God's working now. Um, um, and and so in their minds, I mean, they're not looking for the Messiah because they think the miracles are already happening, and God's already at work now, that kind of stuff. When you listen to them, okay, so so they're saying the time is near, um, or I mean, even sort of saying the time is now, okay, so so God says don't go after them, but also, I mean, I just heard this article today. So on the other side of the fence is we got Biden, and so I read this article talking about Biden and his trip to Israel. So he's planning to go to Israel the 13th through the 16th of July. And the things they wrote about Biden in this article, and the things that Biden said, I think it was an interview about Biden himself, talking about himself. And um he said, like, I actually think this might have came from John Haller's prophecy update this week. I think he might have been reading this article about Biden going to the Middle East. But it, Biden talks about how, like, well, I already brought, the end to the war last year. I made the war in Israel only be 11 days last year, and then I'm gonna go and help Israel make peace with the Palestinians, and we're also gonna help Israel make peace with Saudi Arabia, and do some more builds on the Abrahamic Accords. And so the way he talks about himself and the way that, others have talked about him is like he's a messianic figure, okay, bringing peace to the Middle East. Well, first of all, truth alert, I don't believe it was he that put an end to the war last year in Israel. I believe it was Egypt that did that last year. So it's very interesting to me because he's planning to go to the Middle East. And, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but the year 2020 was Trump doing all this quote unquote. Okay, so I put it in quotes because I don't believe that Trump brought real peace to Israel. Okay. But he started with his quote unquote deal of the century in January 2020. He had 6 normalization quote unquote deals, starting from August 13th going through February. I think might have been the last one, of 2021. There were 6 of them. Take note, 6 peace deals, quote unquote. Okay. And so what we have is Biden, like, kind of trying to do what Trump spent a year doing in this one trip that he's doing. Okay. So if so I've talked in my videos before about how there's twins okay, so there's the story of Rebecca, and she has twins in her wound. Okay. So I talked about how the left and the right, the militant on the left and the militant on the right, and their leaders were, what we have is twins. Okay. And I've seen that there was stuff that Obama did that was similar to what Trump did, and there was stuff that Biden's doing that was similar to what Trump did. And and so I didn't really see that much different from what Trump did than what Obama did. There was similar things, there was similar mistakes that Trump made. And I don't really remember now because it's been so long, I'll have to refresh my memory, if Obama tried to, make peace in the Middle East when he was president. But, we're definitely seeing it now with Biden. So basically the bottom line is false messiahs. Okay, don't follow Biden, don't follow Trump. Okay, wait for the Messiah. Okay, don't follow Obama. Okay, they definitely treated him like he was the Messiah. I think like Time Magazine said that about him. So anyways, I just think it's very interesting that we got Biden trying to do both the things that Trump did in 2020. Oh, because let me say this too. So Biden is, he's 2-state solution in Israel. He wants to divide the land. He wants to do 2-state solution, which is why he's going to talk to the Palestinians. But what's interesting too is right now, okay, so Israel's government fell, I think it was June 20th. The government fell, and so instead of Bennett now being prime minister, we have Lapid. Okay, and so I've heard that Lapid is um like pro two-state solution. Okay. Um and so what's kind of interesting is I've seen in Israel's history that what God's tried to do is whenever America's president is pro two-state solution, God will try to bring to government in Israel someone who's anti two-state solution. Okay, and then vice versa. Okay, so it's interesting that right now we're under that. We got Lapid, who's the acting prime minister in Israel. Is, I mean, if it's really true that he's pro two-state, um, I mean, I think he probably is. I think I've heard him talk like that. And then, we got Biden, who's definitely pro two-state solution. I mean, Biden definitely, can say that he likes the nation of Israel and blah, 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 but I don't think it's really true. And so it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen. Okay. Um, because I don't think God will allow this current state to last for very long. Okay. I mean, it's kind of easy to believe that something would happen in Israel with the government or whatever. Or maybe Lapid wouldn't have a lot of, be given a lot of power, to try to do stuff with two-state. I know Netanyahu's followers would definitely rise up and protest if Lapid tried to divide the land. But I'm also kind of wondering if that Biden with his what do you call it, rose-colored glasses is not is going to go talk to the Palestinians, and that they might take advantage of the fact that he's got rose-colored glasses to maybe try to assassinate him. Because what's interesting is that, well, I guess I'll wait till we get to the date page to talk about that part. Okay, so let's keep going on. So when you hear of wars and disturbances, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end does not follow immediately. Okay, so we've definitely seen there's war in Ukraine right now, over 120 days so far. There's other wars going on too, but we just don't really hear about them on the news. Because I think there's been war in Yemen has been going on. And then, in disturbances. So what we've heard, I mean, just in the last couple days, the Japanese, former prime minister, he was assassinated. In Sri Lanka, there was an uprising, and they brought down the current government in Sri Lanka. Seems like there was another country too. And so then in United Kingdom, they're trying to get rid of Boris Johnson, okay, because they don't like him. Okay, so definitely we see governments, being, disturbances in governments, countries definitely not getting along. So, and then this war in Ukraine's been going on since February. So, and really in Israel too, they really are fighting this silent war with Iran because they're trying to keep Iran. Well, first of all, they're trying to keep Iran's proxies in check, Hezbollah, Hamas. But then they're trying to keep Iran from getting its foothold in Syria, They don't want Iran that close to Israel, Israel's borders. And they're trying to keep Iran from becoming a nuclear power. Okay. So they've been fighting kind of this silent, quiet war with Iran. Okay. So that's what's going on with war, just a little bit of what's going on with wars and disturbances. Okay, and then he continued by saying to them, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be great earthquakes, and in various places, plagues and famines. There will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Okay, so I listed here Boris Johnson out, guy shot in Japan. So nation against nation, but also kingdom against kingdom could be like people group versus people group within countries fighting against each other. I mean, we see that in America, that we have Americans versus Americans, Democrats versus Republicans, okay? And even in the Republican Party, the extremist against the moderate Republicans, and probably the same thing's happening with the Democrats, okay? Okay, and there'd be great earthquakes, and in various places, plagues. So we've seen the coronavirus for the last 2 years, maybe longer by now. And famines. Okay, so we've definitely seen famines and drought, and the cost of living is so high right now. So that's going on. And there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Okay, but before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and will persecute you, delivering you to the synagogues and prisons, bringing you before kings and governors for my name's sake. It will lead to an opportunity for your testimony. Okay. So God's people are going to be persecuted. Okay. So we've definitely seen, God's people being persecuted. And then, like, now with Roe v. Wade being overturned, I think we're seeing, like, the pro-life clinics are being, targeted. And then one thought I had too was I've been watching the January 6th hearings. And what's been interesting to me is to see some of these people that are willing to come and, kind of share their, being witnesses against Trump, which is actually kind of hard to do because Trump has a lot of power and could really destroy someone's, political career if they speak out against him. But they're willing to stand up, against that. And share a testimony because there was this one guy that shared, all right, I'm not going to remember his name, but he was talking about how, because he was a Christian, he believed that, he believes the Constitution was written by God, and so that he had an obligation as a, Christian to follow the Constitution, and so I thought it was an awesome testimony that he was sharing. And so that's an example of where, God's, bringing his people before kings and governors, to give them an opportunity to share their testimony. Okay. So it's neat to hear these people share their testimonies of why they chose to follow the law when all the people around them were breaking the law during that time. Okay. So definitely kind of interesting. And okay, so then, God says, so make up your minds not to prepare beforehand to defend yourselves, for I will give you utterance and wisdom which none of your opponents will be able to resist or refute. But you will be betrayed even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Um, and you will be hated by all because of my name. Okay, so um, so I think that's an example of those who were betrayed by the Trump followers. They weren't allowed to buy or sell because they didn't have the Marcus 666. Okay, I think we're seeing the fulfillment of those verses where, we saw that with Liz Cheney, that they took away one of her leadership positions because she, wouldn't, follow Trump, support Trump the way they wanted her to. Okay. And they see her as, um, a betrayer, but, who are the true betrayers in that situation? But it's been interesting to listen to the January 6th hearings, because there's been a bunch of people that have, shared that they were just shocked to see how people behaved during that time. People that they've worked with during the time of Trump all of a sudden went crazy after the election. And we're trying to overthrow the election. So definitely very interesting. And what I really believe is that deluding influence that God talks about in the last days, came on Trump and his followers after the election or during the election. So anyways, and then so God says, yet not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your lives. Okay, so I think we're being called to endure past the 1335 days. And the 1335th day of Trump's presidency was when on September 15th, 2020, he had peace signings in Washington, D.C. Okay. And so I think, and that could be when the deluding influence started too. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I mean, it's highly possible that's when it started. Because people think, oh my gosh, Trump created peace in the Middle East, um, so they got delusional about Trump, and but God is calling his people to endure past the 1335 days. Okay. Okay, so then Jesus says, but when you see, okay, so this is Luke 21:20, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Okay, so what was interesting to me is that, okay, well, first of all, we already saw the cities of America surrounded by rioters and protesters during the starting with the George Floyd. It actually started, okay, so April 26th of 2020. First, we had the Trump followers protesting the shutdowns. Then on May 26th, which was interesting, it was exactly a month later, was the start of the George Floyd rioting and protesting, and looting and whatever. And then what was interesting was what happened on January 6th of 2021. And now we're seeing the pro-abortionist rioting and protesting. Okay. So then God says, okay, so when we see that happening, recognize her desolation is near. So we gotta be getting pretty close, okay? Because we're seeing, in the last days, I think we're in the last days because we're just seeing this militant spirit rise up, okay? And I mean, we have people militant on the left and we have militant on the right that are willing to go to civil war for their cause, okay? And I mean, that's, kind of what's kind of eye-opening about the January 6th hearings. And so I'm really interested to listen to the one on uh, the 12th, the morning of the 12th, um, which is just in a couple hours, because they're going to talk about the Proud Boys and the, oh, what's the other group? I can't think of their names. Um, you know, I mean, because, that is definitely, will give us a picture of the militant right in their thinking. Okay. Um, I mean, we've already seen it in some of the hearings of, they were ready to go to war, to try to keep Trump in power. Okay. Um, and they see it as kind of like their righteous calling, um, like a religious calling. Um, so definitely scary. I mean, but if you know Messiah, it's not scary. And if you read God's word, then it's been prophesied ahead of time. Um, and so, okay, so then it says, those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Okay, so I think those in Judea relate to the Messiah's followers. And we should look to the mountains where our help comes from, the Lord. Okay, Psalm 121. Okay, and those who are in the midst of the city must leave. Okay, so Biden right now and his followers would be the ones in the midst of the city. Well, okay, so we're seeing the pro-abortionists going into the cities to protest. Okay, so they must leave. Okay, they're going to be in trouble if they don't leave. And but also, like, you could say, like, the current leadership, they're going to, um they're going, they must leave. Okay, or they're going to be in trouble. Okay, and then it says those who are in the country must not enter the city. So what I believe is that right now God considers Trump's followers to be in the wilderness. Okay, and what he's saying is they shouldn't be doing another January 6th type event. Okay, don't enter the city to try to revolt against the current government. Okay, but I think that's what's going to happen. Okay, and then God says, because these are days of vengeance, so that all things which are written will be fulfilled. Okay, so days of vengeance could connect to God's vengeance against his enemies, but also could connect to the right venging against the left, and the left taking vengeance against the right. And, and then we're going to see the, the pro-abortionists wanting to take vengeance against the right. And then so then those verses we started with, woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babes in those days, for there be great distress upon the land and wrath to this people, and they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Okay. And so it says, so I wrote, Biden and peeps are allowed to trample America until the fullness of their sin. And I wrote 2 full years. And so partly what we have is that we, okay, so the 2-year, okay, let me see if I can find this. So we passed, or we're about to pass, the 2-year anniversary of I can't find it right now, but of Obama joining, so like 2 years ago around this time, Obama had joined, had finally decided he was going to support Biden. Okay. And so we passed the 2-year mark of that. Okay. But also what's interesting is that on the 14th of July is the 7-year anniversary of the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal that Obama put together. Okay, so July 14th, 7 years ago, was a very prophetical day because that was when Obama, signed the JCPOA with Iran. And then also, too, that was when the Planned Parenthood um, um, videos were released showing how Planned Parenthood was like selling baby body parts. And so it was a very prophetical day. There was a verse that actually just summed it up really well, a Bible verse. And so I believe it was a highly prophetical day. And so I kind of wonder, God talks about making a covenant with the many for 1 week. And then in the middle of the week, there'll be a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. So the 7 years could be a fulfillment of that verse, where you have the 7 years from July 14, 2015 to July 14, 2022. Okay, so you had a year and a half after Obama signed the JCPOA. There was a year and a half until Trump became president. Then there was the 4 years of Trump's presidency. And then there was a year and a half of Biden's presidency before July 14th, 2022. Okay, so the timing is definitely kind of interesting. Okay, so that's why July 14th to me is a high watch date. Okay. So that's definitely interesting. Um, so, and then it says Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Okay, so if you understood what happened during the time of Obama being president, is, Obama and the left, they hate America and they wanted to use America's riches to feed their left agenda. Okay. And so Obama did that for 8 years, but then Trump came and put a stop to that. Okay, so that could be another, that could be the meaning of the stop to sacrifice and grain offering. But then when Biden came back, he continued, that left agenda. Okay, so there was a head wound, okay, to Obama that was healed when Biden came back. Okay, and so they were able to continue their world global agenda, the left agenda of, climate change and, all the crazy stuff that the left does, and using America's riches to pay for their leftist globalist agendas. Okay. And so, I believe that God allowed Biden to come back so that he can, bring the fullness of their sin. Okay. And so that's the trampling of America, or Jerusalem being trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. Okay, the trampling of America. Another picture we see in scripture is Belshazzar like drinking the wine from the vessels of the temple. Okay, until the writing on the wall. Okay, and and what I thought was interesting is the writing on the wall is that we had Trump wrote this 12-page paper after the January 6th hearings started. Because the writing on the wall, you see the back of the hand that did the writing. Okay. Well, it's one hand, so it's like 5 fingers. So it connects to the number 5. Trump wrote his paper on Pentecost. It was like day 50. Okay. I think it was the Orthodox Pentecost. Okay. So that could be the back of the hand. And basically what the hand was saying was like, your days are numbered. Okay. In that story. And, so I'm kind of sure Trump probably said something similar in his paper. I didn't read the 12 pages. So, definitely interesting. Okay. And see, that's why you don't need to be deceived into believing that the election was stolen. God allowed Biden to win. I mean, there was a couple different reasons why Biden won. One is, people didn't like Trump. Even like people that probably voted for him didn't like him anymore and wanted to get rid of him. Because he caused so much division. But God allowed Biden to win because like I said, he allowed Biden to come back, to complete the fullness of their sin. Okay. And we shouldn't be surprised when God brings evil rulers to an evil nation. Okay. To bring judgment to the nation. Okay. So then it says, there be sign in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. Okay. So, we've definitely seen signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Stuff happening in the in the sky. Because I think in the month of June there was like 5 planets that were aligned. We've seen blood moons, we've seen eclipses, and then but also too, if we understand, like, so it talks about perplexity, well, definitely on the earth dismay among nations, definitely seen that. And then if you understand like the roaring of the sea and the waves, that kind of connects to the beast from the sea. Okay. And so I believe that Biden is the beast from the sea and Trump is the beast from the earth. And so we've seen, have we seen perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves? Okay, so that's what we're seeing right now, is if Trump and his followers are the sea and the waves, we've already seen some fulfillment, and now we're seeing it again. So we're dismayed about the George Floyd protest, and now we're dismayed about the abortion protest. Okay. And then we have men fainting from fear and expectations of the things which are coming upon the world. Okay, so now on the other side, so we have like the right, dismayed about, or the right and God's people dismayed about George Floyd protest, and now dismay about the abortion protest. But now on the other side of the coin, the left is concerned about the Trump followers and the January 6th riots. But also they're just worried about what the Supreme Court, what else the Supreme Court is going to overthrow. And then so it says, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Okay. So I don't see a whole lot in here that hasn't been fulfilled. It seems like we're seeing a lot of this stuff happening right now, like most of it happening right now. And so I really think we could lift up our heads because our redemption is drawing near. So here's my charted dates. So I told you that Trump did his deal of the century January 28th. One of the things I've been following is the weeks after the deal of the century, because key things have been happening on certain key weeks. On the 6th week After the deal of the century was when we had the pandemic was declared, the 6 week, the second day. Okay. Um, Definitely, always see 62 or um, always seem to be repeated a lot in prophetic history. 7 weeks after the deal of the century was when we saw the 50th state with COVID. Um, and then seventh week, the second day after the deal of the century, was the start of the coronavirus shutdown, which was day 50. Uh, um, so is that 50 days after the deal of the century? I guess so. Um, so definitely very interesting. And then 12 weeks after the deal of the century was 426, which, is when I told you that like Trump protesters were protesting the shutdowns. 120 days, the 17th week after the deal of the century was the start of the George Floyd riots, 5/26, 2020. 190 days after the deal of the century was the explosion in Lebanon, 8/4. We seem to like have entered like a fiery furnace type um, time at that time. 8/4, by the way, is Obama's birthday. So that was definitely interesting. Okay, so August 13th. Okay, so here's the 5 peace deals, and then if you added to the deal of the century, you got 6 there. This is from August 13th to February 1st. On September 15th, so I mentioned that before, that's the peace deal signings in Washington. It was the 33rd week. I don't know where the 33rd week, was that the 33rd week after the deal of the century? And like I said, it was 100, and it's the 1335th day of Trump. Okay. But we got to don't get stuck on that day. Okay. Keep continuing, because Trump is not your Messiah. So keep enduring until the true Messiah comes. Okay. Don't get stuck. So I'm thinking maybe really highly possible that that's when the diluting influence started, was September 15th. And then, so the 70th week after the deal of the century, that was very interesting, because then that's when Netanyahu was voted out and the Israeli opposition party struck a coalition deal, and that was June 2nd of 2021. Okay, so we see that 6-2 number. Okay, which connects to Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about 62. Okay, so connects to that verse and prophecy in the book of Daniel. Okay, and then the 70th week, the 4th day, Trump was kicked off of Facebook and Instagram for 2 years. So, okay, so then November 7th, 2020 was 9 months, 11 days after the deal of the century. Isn't that fascinating? 9/11. Okay. It was the 40th week, after the deal of the century. Okay. So the election on the 40th week, Biden was declared the winner on 11/7. Okay, so that's interesting, seeing the 11/7 or 7/11 connected to Biden. Okay. 62 days after 11/7 was January 7th, which was Orthodox Christmas. That was the Electoral College vote. So there's that verse that I was saying. Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of 62. So they were kind of saying that like the vote happened on January 6th, but I think it went past midnight. But about the age of 62. Okay. Which was 11 months, 11 days after the deal of the century. the 49th week after the deal of the century. Okay, 120 days after the peace signings on 9/15/2020 was Trump's second impeachment vote. Okay, which was 50 weeks after the deal of the century. Okay, so trust me, important things happen on important time. Like if you know what to count from, um, there's certain numbers that kind of pop up. Okay, so what was interesting is that, so we had Trump's peace deals from 8/13 to, okay, so what do I got here? 8/13 to February 8th is 180 days. Okay, so that connects to the 180-day banquet that we read about in Esther 1. Okay, and then February 9th to February 13th was Trump's second impeachment trial. Okay. And so actually, okay, so I want to tell you this because this is really interesting. So I was highly, highly, highly expecting Trump's second impeachment trial to last 7 days. Because why? Because in Esther 1, we read about a 180-day banquet, and then it talks about a 7-day banquet. So I was highly, 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 highly expecting Trump's second impeachment trial to last 7 days. Okay, it did not last 7 days. It lasted 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It only lasted 5 days. Okay, so I was surprised by that, and so I didn't know what to do with that. Well, so now what's really fascinating to me is that one thought I had about the fulfillment of the 7th-day banquet is, like I said, the 7-year anniversary of the Iran deal on July 14th. Okay, is that a possible fulfillment of the 7-day banquet? But another thing that I'm looking at is, okay, so we've had the January 6th hearings, and we've had 6 so far. And then the 7th one is on July 12th. And so they're planning right now an 8th one on July 14th. Okay. But what if the world gets turned upside down before that? So maybe the 8th one doesn't happen. Okay. So that could be a possibility, a possible fulfillment of the 7-day banquet. And even if they do a hearing on the 14th, even if we do end up having an 8-day, see, there's a lot of prophecies about the 8th day. Okay, so maybe, tomorrow we're going to fulfill the 7th day of the 7-day banquet, and then we're going to see some fulfillments of the 8th day. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So that's all very fascinating to me. Okay. So that's why I said I think the 14th is the high watch day. Okay, so then the 119th week after the deal of the century included May 14th, 2022, which was when we saw abortion protest on that day in DC. Okay, so remember, May 14th is the anniversary of Israel becoming a nation, being established as a nation. Okay, so kind of interesting that on that day we saw abortion protests in DC. Before Roe v. Wade was even overturned. The 120th week after the deal of the century was the Republican primary in Pennsylvania. So now I was highly looking at the 120th week because I thought maybe the end to Trump would be 120 weeks after the deal of the century. But it's almost really like he kind of returned on the 120th week. Okay. And because what we saw is that Trump was really starting to campaign for people running for the primaries. When the first one was um, the Republican primary in Pennsylvania, what was interesting is Dr. Oz was running, and Trump was, putting his support behind him. And so I thought that was interesting because I wrote, "Don't look at the man behind the curtain." Okay. Um, so I just think that's kind of interesting. Okay. Um, um, so Dr. Oz has always been kind of this goofy person. Okay, so just kind of interesting that Trump was supporting him. I mean, just if you question whether Trump's saying, sometimes you should look at the people that he considers himself friends with. Okay. And then 123 weeks after the deal of the century was the start of the January 6th hearings. Okay. Um, and then, like I said, the seventh hearing is on 7/12/2022, which is the 128th week. Okay. Um, yeah. And then the 125th week, which, like, I broke that down to week 70 plus 55 was the collapse of the Israeli government. Okay, so that's significant because like we read in scripture about one of the kings was king for like 55 years. Okay. And um so what was the deal? Oh, so that was interesting because Bennett was like prime minister for 55 weeks. Okay. So definitely kind of interesting. And then okay. So what I thought was interesting is, so 123 weeks after the deal of the century was the start of the January 6th hearings, which was 6/9/2022. What's interesting is Aaron dies at 123. So could the start of the January 6th hearings be the start of the downfall of Aaron? I'm not sure. I mean, a Biden, like if Aaron is a prophetic shadow of Biden. Okay. That's what I'm wondering. Oh, because let me talk about Aaron dying at 123. So I read the story about Aaron dying. Okay. And so they go to Mount, okay, what is the mountain that Aaron dies at? Aaron dies on Mount Hor, I think is what it's called. And they go up to the mountain and he dies. Okay, at 123 years of age. Okay, and they take the garments off of him and put him on his son. Okay. And what's interesting is they talk about this mountain that they go up. And so what's interesting is that in the Torah, and while the Israelites are wandering around the wilderness, there's 3 mountains that are mentioned. Okay. And there's the mountain that Moses died on, there's the mountain that Aaron died at, and then there's the Mount Sinai that the Torah came from. Okay. And so I definitely think that's a prophetic shadow of what I think is that we have the mountain that the Torah came from is a prophetic shadow of Messiah. Okay. And then I think Moses could be a prophetic shadow of Trump, and Aaron could be a prophetic shadow of Biden. But sometimes Moses is a picture of the Messiah. Okay. Of Jesus. And so what's interesting is when you're reading about the mountain that Aaron died on, it mentions about how it's on the border of Moab, I think is what it talks about. I'm sorry I don't have my notes to look up. I forgot to bring my notes with me. But um, so what's interesting is when the rabbis look at this, they write and say, okay, it's because Aaron, like, um was friends with the Moabites, and that's why he ended up dying. Okay. So that was fascinating to me in terms of, okay, now we got, Biden planning to go to Israel and, um, um, go talk to the Palestinians like he's friends with them. Okay. And, so that's why I'm really curious to see. I mean, it was interesting to me because, with this high watch date, July 14th, okay, it doesn't quite work because Biden's going to be out of the country. Okay. Because what I used to think was going to happen is that I believed Trump's followers were going to somehow kidnap Biden or, somehow go after him. Because there's this story in scripture about this man Gedaliah who um he's the governor of Israel, um and he's only a governor for a short time, and this guy named Ishmael, not the original Ishmael but another Ishmael, and 10 followers, they go and they kill Gedaliah. Okay. And so I thought that was like a last day prophecy of, because, so I had Trump being Ishmael, because you know how the original Ishmael is called the wild donkey of a man and he'll be against everybody. I thought that definitely was fulfilling the prophecy of Trump, but also Ishmael is definitely fulfilling the prophecy of like the Palestinians, okay, or the Arabs that are against Israel, okay. So that's why we see in part and we prophesy in part, because sometimes these prophetic shadows can have dual meanings, okay? And so then you don't really know how it's going to play out until it plays out, okay? And so it wasn't until I was like studying about Biden's trip to Israel that I was like, well, I mean, we read in Revelation about the beast and the 10 horns, hate the harlot. Okay, so now we definitely know the harlot right now is the abortion protesters. Okay, the abortion right protesters. Okay, the ones that love abortion and love to kill their babies. Okay, that's the harlot. And so we see the beast and the 10 horns, they hate the harlot. Okay. So I definitely think Trump plus his followers, the 10 horns, are going to rise up against these pro-abortion protesters. Okay. Um, um, so we see that number 11 there, the beast plus the 10 horns. And so we have Ishmael plus 10 followers. Okay. That's 11 people too. Okay. And so that's why I thought that was Trump there. Um, um, that rise up to kill Gedaliah. Okay. So we'll have to see how it gets played out. But it's possible that maybe the Ishmael and the 10 horns that rise up, I mean, could be Palestinians that rise up against um, Biden, or it could be Netanyahu plus his followers rising up against Biden. We'll just have to see what happens. Okay, so a lot of possibilities. Okay, but I also definitely think we could be seeing the downfall of Biden soon because the fullness of his sins. He's definitely trying to spend a lot of America's money for his global agenda. What was interesting is that July 9th, we had abortion right protesters outside the White House. And then on the 10th of July, we saw Biden in Rehoboth Beach was, his message to the protesters was keep protesting. He talked about wanting to have a national law, to make abortion legal in this country. He's considering, calling a public health emergency, which means our tax dollars and our health emergency money would go toward these abortionists, to their issues instead of saving, like our public health funds for a real actual public health emergency, so definitely trampling America. So anyways, and I mean there's just a whole bunch of oh well, I didn't mention this either at the beginning of the video, but woe to those who are pregnant. Just even listening to Biden's speech on July 8th, he talked about, with Roe v. Wade being overturned, he talked about it being, he said, this is not some imagined horror, it's already happening. And so just their language about it, was so extreme, and, and then he talked about the Republican extremist. What was interesting too is, I talked about the deluding influence on Trump followers, that may have started on the 1335th day. But what was interesting on July 8th too was, when Biden was talking about Roe v. Wade being overturned, there was also a Democrat senator who talked about how they should take their righteous anger, to fight against Roe v. Wade being overturned. Okay, well, so that's a deluding influence. If you think fighting for abortion is righteous anger, so we're seeing that deluding influence on that side of the aisle too. So definitely just a lot going on. And so I definitely think we've seen a fullness of sin with Biden. And he was definitely trying to renew the Iran deal. That didn't pan out. So let's see, so what was I talking about? Okay, so Aaron dying at 123. Okay, so so I don't know if there was kind of like a big switch. Let me look at this here on the 123rd week of, let me see if I see anything maybe that Biden did. I mean, we do know that on the 123rd week was when Iran was threatening to destroy Tel Aviv and Haifa. Okay. And then let's see. That was the week that they started the January 6th hearings. Okay. Also on June 9th, okay, which was the first hearing on primetime TV, was when the International Atomic Energy Agency's had said that there was 3 to 4 weeks um, until they won't be able to verify Iran's nuclear capabilities. Okay. So I'm wondering if, okay, so I was just kind of wondering if there, what Biden may have done on the 123rd week to cause God to say, okay, you're done. Okay. And so it really could be this statement from Grossi about Iran's nuclear capabilities because um I mean, because really America, if Biden really loved Israel, he would have gone to war with Israel against Iran. Okay, instead of trying this stupid peace deal or this JCPOA thing that didn't work, um, that just basically allowed, oh, well, seriously, like, you talk about fullness of sin. The fullness of sin is, okay, so this is what's going on is that the fullness of sin is, that Iran now has, so I guess like the other day, the IAEA, finally came back and said, yeah, right now Iran's nuclear capable. Um, and so they gave us that warning on the 123rd week, is that they said you only have like 3 to 4 weeks and they're probably going to be nuclear capable. And so Biden didn't do anything about it. And so um, I think, um, so I think he's under judgment. Okay. And so I think what we're seeing is, so we have this shifting time frame. Um, you know, that could be happening. Okay, so we'll see what happens, how it plays out. So, right now, so then we're coming up on the 128th week, um, which is 70 weeks plus 58 weeks. And so I wish I understood a little bit more about the meaning of 128, like what that could be. What I just thought of is, so how I said like 7-Eleven connects a lot to Biden. And so we saw, like Biden was on the South Lawn on 7-Eleven, July 11th, saying assault weapons need to be banned. We need to do storage of firearms. So he was doing that on 7-Eleven. And then, so what we see with the 128th is, I see that number 812 in there. Okay, so like moving from 7-Eleven to 812. Okay, so is that a possibility? Are we going to see that in the week of 128? Okay. And so what I believe is highly possible is that Trump is the 6th king and he is going to be the 8th king. Okay. And that I definitely believe Messiah is the 9th king. Okay. What's also interesting about the 128 is that you could parse that to be 119 and 9. Okay. So you got the 9/11 there. Okay. And then you got the 9, which I think is the number of Messiah. Okay. Okay, so high watch dates that I'm looking at: July 14th. Like I said, 7 years after the JCPOA, Planned Parenthood video released. It was 50 months after Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay, so I definitely see like the number 5 and the number 50 seem to be connected a lot to Trump and to like last days stuff. You see 5 a lot. The time, and half the times. Half the time connects to the 0.5, or that number 5. Okay. So that's the fact that it's 50 months after moving the embassy. That's very significant, I think. It's 22 months after the 9/15/2020 date that we talked about. Okay. So this was very interesting to me too, is that, so we have the expression about, the last days come after time, and half the time. And so we had Trump did his peace signing on September 15, 2020, which was day 1335 of his presidency. What's interesting is that 668 days after that takes us to July 14th. Okay, 668, or it's actually maybe 667.5, which rounds up to 668, is half of 1335. Okay, so you have this time 1335, and then this half the time, which is 668, 668 days. Okay, so that's definitely very interesting. Okay. So what's interesting, okay, so the other reason why I'm looking at this date is that okay, so in the Torah, it talks a lot about, okay, so when you look at the dates for the Jewish holidays, the 7th month, the 15th day is the start of Sukkot. Okay. And so you could take the Gregorian date, the 7th month, the 15th day, that would take you to July 15th. Okay. So what if a type of Sukkot happens on the Gregorian 7th month, 15th day? Okay. So that could be a possible prophetic shadow that's hidden in the Word of God. Okay. And because the other thing that I'm thinking of too is, so in June, or when did it happen? Okay, so in April, we had Passover. Okay, well, so then on the Jewish calendar, I think in May, we were kind of waiting to see if something would happen on the second Passover. And I mean, I think something did, but we didn't see the Messiah returned. But we saw, so May 15th would have been like the second Passover. And I mean, we had Finland trying to join NATO, announcing they wanted to join NATO on May 15th. Let's see. Oh, we also had the lunar eclipse happen on May 15th. Okay. So definitely interesting. So that the lunar eclipse could have been a shadow of, God could have been saying, keep an eye on the second Passover, but maybe the fulfillment of the second Passover didn't happen on May 15th. Okay. But God was still trying to point out that time frame. So then what I'm wondering is, okay, so if you follow the holidays, the Jewish holidays, there's 3 holidays where all the men are to go to Jerusalem. Okay, so Passover is like the first one. And then the second one that's in that list is Shavuot, or Pentecost. Okay. And so that happened, June 5th was the Jewish Shavuot. Okay, June 13th was the Orthodox Pentecost. What was interesting about that day was that was when Trump signed his 12-page response to the hearings. Okay. And that was actually the day that there was flooding in Yellowstone Park. Okay, so definitely very interesting. Um, that was also when the January 6th hearing, their key witness, his wife went into labor. So definitely all very interesting. Okay, and I told you that I think Trump writing that paper was a picture of the writing on the wall. Okay, um, and so that actually would have been like the end of the 123rd week. Okay, um, so maybe that's the sign to Biden. The end of the writing on the wall. Okay, so then the second. Okay, so first Passover, Shavuot, and so now what I'm wondering is that we should be looking for a second Passover Sukkot type fulfillment. Okay, um, and so I'm wondering if that could be happening on the 7th month, the 15th day on the Gregorian calendar. So you can consider Sukkot to be a second type of Passover. Okay. The first Passover, they couldn't celebrate the first Passover because of a dead man. Okay. So the Biden followers couldn't celebrate Passover because of their dead Messiah. The Trump followers could not do the Passover because of their dead Messiah. Okay. So we need a live Messiah so that we can celebrate the Passover. Okay. So there's that going on. Okay. Um, I mean, there's so many like date things kind of happening. Okay. So July 13th is 33 days after the sign of Jonah. Okay. Um, what was the sign of Jonah? Was on June 11th was 1 year after a man was swallowed by the whale and then spit back out again. Okay. Um, and then, um, so then on the 14th, okay, but what else was interesting too is that, so on the 13th is the 14th of Tammuz, okay, is 1 year after the Surfside building collapse, okay, and so that's kind of what Steve Fletcher has been looking at. He's been looking on the 13th, but another with the Surfside building collapse. What's interesting to me about that is that the collapse started on the 24th of June, okay, last year, okay, and to me it was definitely a big 9/11 sign, okay, so that happened on June 24th. Then on July 4th they tore down the rest of the building, okay, of last year. Then on July 14th, they released the 9/11 calls for Surfside, okay, which is the 21st day after the building collapsed, okay. So what's interesting is that those three dates, well, so what I'm wondering is, so on June 24th this year, exactly 1 year after Surfside collapsed, was Roe v. Wade being overturned. Okay. And so, if you understand, so I really think the 9/11 picture is the picture of civil war. Okay. And that, or it's a picture of, yeah, because you have the two sides, or it's like Jesus on the cross with the two thieves. Okay. The 9 in the middle of the 11. Okay. But we also saw like the falling of the two towers. Okay. So it's going to be like the falling of the two thieves. Okay. But it's like a picture of civil war. Okay. In America. And Um, and so, so then, on July 4th was when, they tore down the building, okay, last year, and so on July 4th this year was when we had like that terrible shooting at the Highland Park Parade in Illinois. There was also some officers shot in Philadelphia on July 4th. Okay. So then, I'm wondering, if we're going to see something happen on July 14th. Okay. So just interesting that the 9/11 connection carries to July 14th. Okay. But July 14th is also um, um, the number 14th is when the Passover lamb gets killed. Okay, so they'd like pick the Passover lamb on the 10th. Okay. Um, and then it gets killed on the 14th. Okay. So Biden could have been picking his Passover lamb when he told the protesters to keep protesting. Okay, so he's making America be the Passover lamb. Okay. If the if July is the picture of the 7th month, July 1st would have been a picture of Rosh Hashanah. And so we would have seen trumpets being blown in some way on July 1st. Okay, so we saw, they actually said, okay, so the New York Times, they said Trump eyes early 2024 announcements. Okay, circle eyes in that headline. Okay, because I think Trump and Netanyahu are the two witnesses. Okay, the Washington Post article said, "Take me up to the Capitol now. How close Trump came to joining rioters." Okay, so definitely horns being blown on July 1st, or trumpets being blown. Um, um, so, and then that was the day the Supreme Court made their last two decisions of the term. Okay, then on July 10th would be a type of Yom Kippur. Okay, and you're supposed to rest on Yom Kippur. Okay, so were you resting and not out protesting the abortion issue on the 10th? Um, um, and so if God was, kind of looking on the 10th, to see who he was going to judge, hopefully you're at home mourning over the falling of this country rather than out protesting. Okay. Um, okay, so that's going on. So then the 14th would be when the Passover lamb gets killed. The 14th is 62 days after May 14th. Remember I told you that 62 number shows up all the time. It's 40 days after Shavuot. It's Bastille Day in France, which is kind of interesting because that's kind of an insurrection type day in France in history. It's 1 year after, okay, on the Hebrew calendar date, 15th of Tammuz, it's 1 year after Derek Chauvin was sentenced. Which, the George Floyd protest was a type of 9/11. Okay, Derek, okay, so remember it was 9 minutes and 29 seconds for George Floyd. That adds up to 9/11. Okay. So, and it did start like a type of 9/11 in our country. Um, if 9/11 is Civil War type stuff. So definitely Oh, okay, and the final thing too. I mean, because there's so much connected to the 14th. The other thing that I just figured out today is that if you take 21 days from when the government of Israel fell, it takes you to July 11th. Okay. It's 21 days. Okay, so remember Daniel was mourning for 21 days, and then on the 24th day, he has a messianic type encounter. So the fall of Israel, their government, the 21st day would take us to July 11th, and then the 24th day would be the 14th. Okay. So definitely another possible fulfillment. So that's why that's a high watch date for me. Okay. You know, so then it'd be kind of like Sukkot Eve. Okay. And then Sukkot would start July 15th. But you also have like July 15th. July 14th is also 15 on the Hebrew calendar. So you don't know all the time like where God could be getting the 15 and where he could be getting the month, type of stuff. So that's what's going on there. Another possible date, if we don't see anything happening on the 4th, I mean, we already know something's going to happen on the 14th because there may be an 8th hearing happening on the 14th. So that could be fulfilling an 8-day type prophecy. Circumcision happens on the 18th. Okay, so maybe a possible day is, 8-day things get cut off on the 8 days. So maybe Biden gets cut off on that day. Maybe Trump's followers do a big switcheroo in their heads on that day, the 8-day, or something. They do a big separation from this country on that day. January 16th is Tammuz 17. Okay, so on the Hebrew calendar, they've had 5 events happen on Tammuz 17, like 5 major events. Okay. They saw the breaching of Jerusalem's walls on the 17th. It's normally a fast day, but it's Sabbath, so the fast won't happen until July 17th. Okay. But another thing to keep in mind is that Jesus said he's gonna overturn the fast days when he returns. We're not gonna be fasting when Jesus returns. Okay. I guess Moses broke the tablets on Tammuz 17. The daily sacrifices were halted on the 17th. The Romans breached Jerusalem on the 17th. May also be when the Babylonians broke through. I guess they're not really sure about that. And then that's the start of the 3-week mourning time of the Jewish people. Okay. I would kind of think we'd have to wait till like the 3 weeks to be the 21 days of Daniel, but it doesn't quite work because then it ends on Av 9, the 9th of Av, and I would expect something to happen if something doesn't happen on July 14th, if something doesn't happen on Tammuz 17th, another date that I'd be looking at is Tammuz 22, which is July 21st. Okay, because of that 8-day thing. Okay, 2022, the number 22 connects to the 8th day. Okay. Although, I mentioned that like the 14th, we got that 8-day, the 8th hearing on that day. But but so I look at Numbers 22 as a possible fulfillment. The year is 22, so that's why I'm looking at the date of 22. So that's a possible day. And then August 6th is the end of the 3 weeks, the 9th of Av. Okay. And that is when, the temple was destroyed. Okay, the 9th of Av is 9/11. the month of Av is the 11th month. On it's the 5th month or the 11th month on the Jewish calendar. And so really, if nothing has happened until then, I'm gonna really be expectant. A very high watch date would be August 6th, the 9th of Av. Okay. High watch date. But we already saw some possible 9/11 connections to July 14th. So we'll see what happens. So hopefully on July 15th is the 16th of Tammuz. That's when the golden calf was made and her was killed. Okay. So just kind of interesting. Okay. So I think that gets you caught up with everything I've been thinking about. Yeah, I don't see any more notes. So I like this picture because if you see fire on the left and fire on the right, then you're out of time. If you see civil war in America. Okay, so one last thing I wanted to say about civil war is so in the Bible, when we read about the history of Israel, Israel got divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Okay. And I really think we are fulfilling the prophecies of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Okay. And I believe that Biden is the southern kingdom. Okay. Biden and his followers are the southern kingdom. Because if you remember the story, okay, so Solomon's son was supposed to become the rightful king, okay, but he wanted to, he didn't want to make the burden easier on the people. He wanted to make it harder. Okay, so there was a group of people, the 10 tribes broke off, okay, from Solomon's son and rebelled against Solomon's son, and they formed the northern kingdom. Okay, and so that would be what they call like the 10 lost tribes. Okay. And so actually 2 tribes ended up following Solomon's son. Okay. So one of them was the tribe of Judah. I think the other one was the tribe of Benjamin. Okay. But what's interesting is when God talks about the 10 tribes, it talks about them rebelling. Okay. And so that's what I think we have. We're fulfilling that right now in America, because what we have is that Trump and his followers I think, are the 10 horns or the 10 lost tribes. Is that they're rebelling against Trump's followers ever since the election, have been rebelling against the rightful winner of the election, okay, which was Biden. Okay. And so they have been in rebellion against the government in America. Okay. So that's the northern kingdom. Okay. And so it actually talks about they were going to go to war, okay, to try to return the government back to, or how does that work? Like, who was going to go to war against who? The northern kingdom against the southern kingdom, or the southern kingdom? I don't remember now, but they were going to go to war to try to return the government back to the rightful owner, okay, which would have been Solomon's son, okay. Well, so what was interesting is that we had kind of a type of a fulfillment of that, where on January 6th, we had Trump's followers were willing to go to war to try to return the government back to Trump, even though he wasn't the rightful, leader, okay. But what was interesting with the war in the northern kingdom versus the southern kingdom, God told them, do not go to war because this turn of events is from me. Okay, I allowed this to happen. Do not go and fight against your brother. Okay. And so I really think that that was what God was saying during the time of the election in January 6th is, do not go to war, because the fact that Biden won is a turn of events that I allowed to happen, okay, because of my purposes for this country. Okay, well, so what's interesting is that I believe we're going to see a second January 6th fulfillment, okay? We're going to see a second 9/11 type event, a second January 6th type event, okay? We're going to see civil war happen in America, okay? But at that time, God is going to separate out his people and put us in a Sukkot type booth or a Passover type protection with the Passover lamb, while the northern kingdom fights the southern kingdom and vice versa, okay. And so that's what I get out of what I read in prophecy, okay. And so go read that chapter about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. It's Rehoboam and Jeroboam. You could do search on those guys to read about it, because I think we're fulfilling that right now, okay. And so there's always a repeat of history, okay. So what's interesting is that we're having a repeat of Watergate, okay. So every 50 years there's kind of a repeat of events, or a turnaround of events. And so what's interesting is Roe v. Wade is being turned around after 50 years. And then 50 years ago, we had Nixon that was, willing to break the law to get, to stay in power, and so now we saw a repeat of that with, okay, so during the hearings of Trump, we, kind of acknowledged the 50-year anniversary of Watergate, the Watergate hearings, okay. What's interesting is with Watergate, the break-in happened in June, and the hearings happened in January, and then it was like backwards for Trump. The break-in, the Watergate moment happened in January, and the hearings are in June and July, okay. But just such a repeat of history, okay. So that is what is going on. And I think there's kind of a repeat of some of this stuff in Israel too, where all the time where Bennett and Lapid were in government, we had Netanyahu's followers were protesting against the government, okay, and rebelling against the government and not accepting them as their government. I mean, because it was interesting when the government got overthrown, or fell, or whatever you call it, collapsed. Netanyahu was like, okay, now's our time to come back. So he's waiting in the wings, waiting for his time to come back. Okay. So definitely really interesting. So that's what I got for you today. There's a lot of information. I wish I had more time to do a lot more slides and videos, and but I think time's short, so I have a lot to get ready. in a couple days. But I really wanted to get this video out because I was hoping it would encourage you. I think we could be almost out of time. I guess I'd be really, 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 really surprised if something doesn't happen in the next 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks till August. So what is that actually? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3.5 weeks till August 6th. I'd be really surprised. So definitely look up for your redemption draws nigh. I pray for God's grace for you that'll give you the grace to endure this crazy time in the world. If the world's crazy, we can be encouraged, because Jesus said, look up for your redemption draws nigh. We can be encouraged, knowing that the time is near. Okay. So hopefully you're encouraged by this video. And like I said, I pray for God's grace for you to help you endure the hard times. Okay. So, thank you so much for listening to my videos. I really appreciate, you tuning in, and just, God bless. Take care.